What if victory wasn't won by the largest army, but by the muddiest field? Imagine being outnumbered, sick, and trapped, with an entire kingdom's might arrayed against you. This was the reality for King Henry V on a cold October morning in 1415. The year is 1415, deep within the brutal saga of the 100 Years' War. For decades, England and France had been locked in a bitter struggle over England's claim to the French throne. A new king sat on England's throne. Henry V young, ambitious, and pious, he was determined to prove his legitimacy and press the claim his ancestors had made. Across the Channel, France was a kingdom in chaos. Its king, Charles VI, suffered from debilitating bouts of madness, leaving a power vacuum that his nobles fought viciously to fill. France was fractured by a bloody civil war between two powerful factions, the Armagnacs and the Burgundians. It was this internal weakness that Henry V saw as his divine opportunity. In August 1415, Henry landed in Normandy with an army of around 12,000 men. His first target was the strategic port of Harfleur. He expected a swift victory. Instead, he got a grueling 5-week siege. The city's defenders were stubborn, and the English camp soon became a breeding ground for disease. The dreaded bloody flux, likely dysentery, tore through Henry's army. Thousands died not from French weapons, but from sickness. When Harfleur finally fell, Henry's army was a shadow of its former self, reduced to perhaps 9,000 men, many of whom were still ill. The campaigning season was over. The safe option was to sail home. But Henry was no ordinary king. To sail home now would look like retreat. In a bold, almost reckless display of defiance, he decided to march his weary army 250 miles overland to the English-held port of Calais. It was a calculated provocation, a demonstration of his right to march through his French territory. The French nobility, who had been slow to react, were finally stung into action. They assembled a colossal army, a glittering host of France's greatest knights and nobles. The French army, led by the Constable of France, Charles d'Albret, shadowed the English, blocking their path. They intended to trap and annihilate the weakened invaders. Henry's men were starving, exhausted, and demoralized. For days, the French blocked their attempts to cross the River Somme, forcing them on a desperate detour south. Finally, the English found an unguarded crossing and slipped past the main French force. But their escape was short-lived. On October 24th, as the English marched north, they crested a hill and saw their worst fears realized. The entire French army was arrayed before them, blocking the road to Calais. They were trapped. The location was a small patch of countryside near the castle of Agincourt. The fate of two kingdoms would be decided here. The disparity in numbers was terrifying. While medieval chronicles often exaggerate, modern historians estimate the English had between 6,000 and 9,000 men. The French army was at least 15,000 strong, and possibly much, much larger. The core of Henry's army was not knights, but commoners. Around 80% of his force were longbowmen, yeomen from the farms and villages of England. These were not simple peasant levies. They were professional soldiers, masters of a devastatingly effective weapon. The French army was the opposite. It was a celebration of feudal aristocracy, a sea of heavily armored knights and men-at-arms, confident in their martial prowess and social superiority. They saw this as an opportunity to win glory and capture rich English nobles for ransom. The key to the English army was the yew longbow. Standing 6 feet tall, it had a draw weight of over 100 pounds, requiring immense strength and years of dedicated practice to master. An expert archer could loose 10 to 12 arrows a minute. Fired in volleys, they created a lethal arrow storm that could blot out the sky. These arrows, tipped with sharpened bodkin points, could pierce mail and find the weaker points in plate armor at over 200 yards. It was the machine gun of the Middle Ages. But on this day, England's greatest ally was the terrain itself. The battlefield was a narrow corridor of open ground, a freshly plowed field flanked by the dense woods of Tremicourt and Agincourt. This funnel would prevent the larger French army from using its numbers to envelop the English flanks. All their force would have to come straight on. And then there was the mud. It had rained for days, turning the clay soil into a deep, clinging morass. This field of mud would become a field of blood. Henry Lève was a brilliant tactician. He arranged his small force across the narrowest point of the field, just 1,000 yards wide. He placed his dismounted men-at-arms in 3 small clusters, with 2 large wedge-shaped formations of longbowmen on the flanks. The archers were angled forward, creating a deadly killing zone. Crucially, Henry ordered his archers to hammer long, sharpened wooden stakes into the ground before them. This simple, hastily prepared defense was designed to break a cavalry charge and impale the horses. That night, the 2 armies camped within earshot of each other. The French camp was filled with noise and confidence. They gambled for the prisoners they would take, assuming victory was a foregone conclusion. The English camp was quiet, somber. The men confessed their sins, preparing for death. Henry walked among them, offering words of encouragement, reminding them of the justice of their cause. This was the night of St. Crispin's Day. It was here that Henry, as immortalized by Shakespeare, supposedly rallied his men, turning their small number into a badge of honor. As dawn broke on October 25th, the 2 armies drew up for battle. For 3 long hours they stood facing each other in the cold morning light. The French, overconfident and disdaining the common-born English archers, were waiting for more reinforcements to arrive. They planned to simply crush the tiny English force with their sheer weight. Henry knew he couldn't wait. His men were weak and had no food. He had to force the issue. In a move of incredible audacity, he ordered his entire army to advance. They pulled up their defensive stakes, marched forward to within extreme bow range, about 300 yards, and hammered their stakes back into the mud. It was an insult the French could not ignore. The battle was on. Henry gave the command. With a single, deafening shout, 5,000 English and Welsh archers drew their bows and unleashed hell. The first volley soared high into the air, a dark cloud of 75,000 arrows that fell with terrifying force upon the heads of the French vanguard. The sound was said to be like a thunderstorm. Goaded into action, the first French wave, a force of mounted knights, charged. Their goal was to shatter the archers before they could inflict more damage, but the charge was a disaster. The narrow field funneled them together, and the deep, sucking mud slowed their powerful war horses to a struggling walk. They became perfect targets. The English archers pivoted, firing volley after volley into the flanks of the cavalry. Horses screamed, fell, and threw their riders into the quagmire. Those who reached the English line were met by the wall of sharpened stakes. The charge collapsed into a chaotic, screaming pile of men and horses. Now, the main French attack began. A massive division of dismounted men-at-arms, thousands strong, began their slow, inexorable advance on foot. They were clad head to toe in the finest plate armor, making them nearly impervious to arrows from the front. But the armor was incredibly heavy. Each step was a monumental effort as they slogged through the boot-deep mud. The arrow storm was relentless. Arrows found gaps in their visors, joints in their armor, or struck them with enough force to knock them off balance. Exhausted before they even reached the English line, the French vanguard crashed into Henry's small band of men-at-arms. Because of the narrow front, the French were packed together so tightly they could barely swing their weapons. The English, less encumbered, had more room to fight. This is when the battle turned into a massacre. The English archers, having exhausted their arrows, dropped their bows. Armed with swords, hatchets, daggers, and heavy mallets used for driving stakes, they swarmed out from the flanks. Unarmored and agile, they slipped around the bogged-down French knights. They struck at exposed joints, pulled knights to the ground, and smashed their skulls through their helmets. The French fell into the mud, and weighed down by their armor, they could not get back up. They were trampled by their own comrades pressing from behind or suffocated in the mud. The pile of bodies grew, creating a gruesome wall over which others had to climb. The English men-at-arms held their line, while the archers butchered the trapped French. The pride of French chivalry was being systematically dismantled by commoners. Suddenly, a cry of alarm rose from the English rear. A small French force, led by a local lord, had raided Henry's lightly guarded baggage train. At the same time, the thousands of French prisoners taken so far were becoming restless. Henry, fearing a renewed attack from the front while being assaulted from the rear, made a terrible, ruthless choice. He gave the order to kill the prisoners. It was a shocking violation of the chivalric code, but in Henry's mind, a brutal necessity for the survival of his army. His knights refused, so the grim task fell to the archers who efficiently dispatched the captured French nobles. Seeing the slaughter of their vanguard and the execution of the prisoners, the French third line, which had barely moved, lost its nerve. They wavered, then retreated from the field. The battle was over. The muddy miracle was complete. The aftermath was horrifying. The English walked through a field of the dead and dying, piled 3 and 4 deep. French losses were catastrophic. An entire generation of their nobility had been wiped out. Estimates range from 6,000 to 10,000 dead, including the Constable of France, 3 dukes, and scores of other high-ranking nobles. In contrast, English losses were astonishingly light, perhaps as few as 150, and no more than a few hundred. The political consequences were immense. The French government was crippled, its military leadership annihilated. The defeat deepened the divisions of their civil war. Henry V returned to London a conquering hero, his throne secure and his prestige unmatched in Europe. This incredible victory paved the way for the Treaty of Troyes in 1420. In it, the broken French government was forced to recognize Henry V as the regent and heir to the throne of France. Agincourt became the defining legend of the English longbow. It was the ultimate story of the common man, the yeoman archer, defeating the arrogant mounted aristocrat through skill and discipline. The Battle of Agincourt was more than just a battle. It was a perfect storm of factors. It was a story of a brilliant commander exploiting a battlefield, of a disciplined army defying impossible odds, and of a revolutionary weapon system changing the face of war. It was a muddy, bloody, and brutal day that humbled an empire and forged a legend that echoes through the centuries. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. If there's a topic or event you're curious about, let us know in the comments for a future video. The visuals within this presentation are crafted to enrich your understanding, serving as artistic interpretations and contextual aids rather than direct factual representations. Their purpose is to illuminate the narrative and deepen your engagement with the historical backdrop. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support keeps history alive.